You're watching Reality Check. It's now almost been a week since India's farmers have been on the streets, continuously protesting, agitating at the borders of Delhi. And the protests, in fact, seem to be getting worse. They seem to be intensifying. That's the big question which we're trying to decode tonight. Because remember, the government has tried to offer multiple assurances saying that none of the fears that the farmers have about losing support price or about losing their freedoms and being able to sell their produce is going to be taken away from these bills. In fact, these bills are going to create greater opportunities for them. So then why are farmers, or at least some Indian farmers, still angry and still protesting? This despite the Prime Minister himself coming out with a series of assurances. Let's listen.
अगर किसान को कोई ऐसा खरीदार मिल जाए जो सीधा खेत से उपज उठाए और बेहतर कीमत दे, तो क्या किसान को अपनी उपज उसे बेचने की आजादी मिलनी चाहिए कि नहीं मिलनी चाहिए? छोटे किसानों के साथ अक्सर धोखा होता था। अब छोटे से छोटा किसान भी मंडी से बाहर हुए हर सौदे को लेकर कानूनी कार्यवाही कर सकता है। ये वही लोग हैं जिन्होंने दशकों तक किसानों के साथ लगातार छल किया है। अब जैसे एमएसपी तो घोषित होता था, लेकिन एमएसपी पर खरीद बहुत कम की जाती थी। अगर मंडियां और एमएसपी को ही हटाना था तो इतनी बड़ी हम ताकत क्यों देते भाई? हम इन पर इतना निवेश ही क्यों करते?
So the Prime Minister himself there trying to reassure farmers. Now again, in theory and in principle, many of what the bills attempt to do can hardly be faulted with if indeed they are widening the scope for farmers to sell their produce outside of a restrictive mandi middleman nexus, as the government's narrative puts it, which again brings us to the question of why the sustained protest. Perhaps there's a gap between the principles and between the theory of what the bill achieves or hopes to achieve and the practice of how it's actually been working on the ground with all of these aspects. So let's look at all the claims being made by the government and by the supporters of the bill versus what the reality has been. And let's start with the first claim, which is that farmers now have the chance to sell outside the mandis. Now, the point here is that farmers actually already have the freedom to sell outside mandis. They can sell wherever they want. The restriction so far has been on buyers, not farmers. Those who buy from farmers have to register themselves at the mandi and in several states even pay a tax to be able to actually purchase from farmers. Now remember, the other point to this, only a fourth of all transactions in India by farmers are taking place inside mandis. This is according to analysis done by Himanshu, who's an economist at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, writing in the Indian Express. So almost 75% transactions are taking place outside mandis, which really begs the question that do farmers want less mandis or do they actually want more mandis and better regulated, better controlled, less exploitative mandis is a question. The claim number two, that this bill will liberate farmers from middlemen. Now again, what's the reality? Do farmers actually perceive middlemen as the biggest threat? Here's an analysis done by Roshan Kishore in the Hindustan Times citing RBI data, where he finds that actually the ban on intermediaries ranks further down in the list of farmers as a response to what they feel help with crop prices. The number one thing that they feel will help is reliable weather forecasts, and all the way down at number 7 is ban on intermediaries. So do they really fear middlemen as much as the government seems to make it out to be? The other question, of course, is that one set of middlemen may replace another. That even if you get rid of the mandi middleman system, there will still have to be people who will buy from farmers and then pass it on down the chain. It may not be middlemen in mandis, but it could be middlemen who represent corporate interests buying outside of mandis. Take, for example, these visuals we're about to play you, where we actually went to what's called a collection center by Future Group, which is part of the parent group of the big bazaar chain of supermarkets. And this is something they've been running for over a decade. Now, essentially, farmers, instead of going to the local sarkari mandis, the sarkari run mandi, bring their produce to this particular collection center of Future Group and sell it over there to essentially private players who are the ones who are collecting the produce from them. The third claim: the new bills are not meant to end the minimum support price. That's what the Prime Minister said. And indeed, there doesn't say anywhere in the bill that they're going to end the support price. So then what's the anxiety? The anxiety is that even while the government is saying that on one hand, it has been sending signals, according to farmers, that it might be phasing out the support price regime. What are these signals? For example, in August 2014, the centre curtailed the state's powers to give bonus over minimum support price. In January 2015, the Shanta Kumar Committee says that a reduced food security footprint will come down from about 70% to about 40% of the population. So if the government is reducing the amount of food it's distributing under the public distribution system, then it might be cutting down on the amount of minimum support price crop that it's procuring from farmers. In December 2015, a Niti Aayog report, and there have been several such reports, said that the need for the reorientation of price policy for farmers is important. This goal can't be achieved through the MSP, since it's neither feasible for the government to buy each commodity in each market in all regions. These are the signals which seem to be triggering some anxiety in the farmers. We also heard the Prime Minister say that until now, farmers were cheated of their support price because of corruption, and now they're getting it. But the fact again shows that farmers even today are struggling with the support price. Only one of 6 major crops are selling above support price. Research by my colleague Mariam Alavi finds. Crops selling below MSP prices currently: bajra down 30%, maize down 23%, ragi down 16%, barley down 9.5%, wheat down 2.5%. Only one crop, paddy, is selling at 5% more, according to these statistics. So a number of these crops are selling below the minimum support price. Finally, claim 4. Only farmers in Punjab and Haryana are protesting. Now, this is of course true, even though we are now beginning to see farmer unrest in other states as well. But there's a reason for this, and this cycles back to our first point. The reason, of course, is that Punjab and Haryana have amongst the best government procurement centers and mandi networks in the country. Anywhere between 60 to 90% of their crops are procured by the government, compared to much lower percentages in other states. Which again begs the question that do these farmers want less mandis, or do they actually want more, better regulated and run mandis like these states, where they can sell their produce? And if those networks actually existed, then perhaps more farmers in other states would be on the streets as well. All right, joining me tonight on Reality Check, I have with me Sardar V.M. Singh, National Convener, All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee. Also Sarwan Singh Pandher, who's the General Secretary of the Kisan Mazdoor Sangharsh Samiti. We have Harish Damodran, Rural Affairs and Agriculture Editor, Indian Express, and Ashok Kumar Thakur, who's the Director of NAFED, which is the National Agricultural Federation. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, Harish Damodran, some of those facts that we put out, which in a sense question this narrative that this bill is so amazing that why should farmers protest? You've been reporting on this story and just even on the political economy of rural India for a long time. is this broadly accurate to say that while there certainly could be benefits that the bill may bring, but at the same time there are worries that particularly the signals being sent out by the government and the ground reality of rural India is quite different?
What you're saying, the signals matter. From what I see a scenario where you will have 3 steps forward on reforms, okay, and 4 steps backwards eventually. I mean, I don't think. What has happened ultimately? Now farmers are saying that MSP should be made a legal entitlement. This was not a real demand, I mean, if you ask, if you ask me, yes, I mean, farmer groups have been saying this, but ultimately MSP has come into the front, right? None of the reform bills mention MSP. Right, so you may very well see a scenario where government walks 3 steps forward and then you go 4 steps backwards. And ultimately the worst case scenario for the government will be it will have to roll back all these 3 laws, which according to me looks increasingly likely. And on top of it, it will have to give this assurance of MSP, making it a legal right. So I think the government has really shot itself on its foot. So and yeah, yes. Because
okay.
You created this.
So when you're saying hold on. So you're saying that the only way around it is that because of these signals coming out from the government about whether they really are serious about continuing with the minimum support price regime, you're saying that they'll have to accede to the demand to make it a legal right, which, as you pointed out, that's not the case right now. Right? I mean, there's no legal pressure on anybody to buy at support price.
It is not, it has never been the case, right? I mean, MSP was always an administrative scheme, right? But now farmers are thinking that, your mandis will close down, the mandis will all become like BSNL, they will become this thing. So therefore, the farmers are buying, they want to buy insurance upfront. They want to get it on they want it on paper, in writing that MSP will become a legal right. This would not have been an issue.
That should be given.
The MSP was expanding gradually.
Okay.
Like you had it in wheat and paddy, then you had it in pulses. It would have been slowly expanding. But now what has happened? I think your government will have to retreat on these 3 bills. They will have to withdraw it, and plus promise farmer organizations, making it
okay. Well, let's see if that happens or not. Before I get Sardar VM Singh to react to that, अशोक ठाकुर जी ये बताइए कि बड़ा सीधा सा सवाल है और इसका पॉइंट कितनी बार आपने भी सुना होगा कि ये कह रहे हैं कि अगर आपके इरादे ये हैं कि आप ये बिल लाकर फार्मर का जो परचेसिंग है और उसकी कैपेसिटी इंप्रूव कर रहे हैं, तो आप एक लाइन इस बिल में डाल दीजिए कि मिनिमम सपोर्ट प्राइस एक लीगल राइट हो जाता है. इसको लेके सरकार इतनी क्यों अड़ी हुई है? Why are they against it?
MSP 1965 से चली जा रही है, ये आज की नहीं. और जो लोग MSP की बात कर रहे हैं, तो MSP जिस कानून के तहत
जी
1965 से लेकर अब तक दे रहे हैं, उसको किसी सरकार ने विड्रॉ नहीं किया है. अगर हम कहें कि जो वर्तमान सरकार है उसके आने के बाद MSP का जो दायरा है वो उसको बढ़ाया गया है
जी,
घटाया नहीं गया. जैसे कांग्रेस के लोग
नहीं, वो बात आपकी सही है. नहीं अशोक जी देखिए, इसमें 2 चीजें. एक सेकेंड. नंबर 1 पॉइंट ये है कि आप MSP जरूर बढ़ा रहे हैं, MSP तो बढ़ता आ रहा है, लेकिन लोगों को MSP नहीं मिल रहा है. जैसे हमने अभी पढ़कर बताया कि जो 6 क्रॉप्स इस वक्त, जो 6 फसल बिक रही हैं इस वक्त मंडियों में, उसमें से पैडी को छोड़कर बाकी सब बिलो MSP पे बिक रही हैं. बाजरा 30% लेस, मेज 23% लेस, रागी 16% लेस, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. तो अगर उनको फार्मर्स को लग रहा है कि इस बिल से जो MSP और मंडी सिस्टम पे अगर इंपैक्ट होने वाला है, तो क्यों ना आप इसको लीगल राइट बना दीजिए. लीगल राइट बनाने में क्या इतनी दिक्कत है?
दिस इज नॉट हैपनिंग फर्स्ट टाइम। अगर आप 2014 से 2004 से 2014 के बीच में अगर आप देखेंगे तो एमएसपी तो मिलती नहीं थी। एमएसपी जब आती है, जब मार्केट में रेट कम होता है तो ही एमएसपी आती है, और एमएसपी के आने से ही हायर रेट मिलता है। यू कैन नॉट एश्योर टू 100% फार्मर, सब लोग जानते हैं। देखिए मैं कह रहा हूं कि
Ashok ji, the minimum support price is not a dynamic thing that it keeps changing. I mean, of course it keeps increasing, but there are a certain number of notified crops. Harish, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's close to 22 or 23, for which the government fixes a support price. It only procures 2 of those crops, largely rice and wheat, but it's notifying the support price for all the others. It's just that farmers don't realize those prices. And that's why they're asking this to be made into a law, especially when you're trying to quote unquote reform the mandi system. But Sardar VM Singh, how do you respond to this, that you're hearing again and again from the government, you're just hearing from a gentleman in NAFED as well, the Prime Minister, that what is your anxiety? We're not taking the minimum support price away, we're continuously increasing it. So then why protest?
I'll come back to that. First, I want to tell you, sir, what Mr. Thakur has been speaking right now, I want to just brief him. I don't think he's done his homework well. Firstly, in 1965, there was no MSP. There was an Agriculture Price Commission that came out in 1965. CSEP came in month later. The 2000 agriculture policy is the one that says there's a guarantee. And what he's talking about, we are not bound to buy. He's from NAFED. NAFED has a, NAFED has a different thing. It's a minimum, it's a market intervention scheme that NAFED has. Harish should, he'd come in there, in my defense. That there's a market intervention scheme that if the market goes below the thing, below a particular price, then NAFED intervenes to raise the price. Minimum support price is a guaranteed price, guaranteed by the government, because minimum support price is based on the input cost, which is fixed by the government. The diesel is fixed by the government. The fertilizer is fixed by the government. The minimum cost of labor is fixed by the government. The fertilizer is fixed by the government.
Hold on.
The pesticides is fixed by the government. Taking an aggregate of all that.
No, but Sardar VM Singh, now
nothing will be sold below that. Therefore, we are saying, why don't you give us a guarantee? And as people are saying time and again, there was no demand for this again. So, Harish, I need to remind you, in 2018, there was a private member bill by AIKSCC where Raju Shetty in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha, and KK Ragesh in the Rajya Sabha, we put in an MSP guarantee bill. Anyone buying for less than this.
You're saying guarantee kare.
The old demand of ours. This is nothing new.
You're saying guarantee us.
Yes,
Sardar VM Singh, just a second. Let me come back to you. No, I'll come back to you. Just a second. Sardar VM Singh, let me come back to you. Sarwan Singh Pandher is also with us. Pandher Saab, now, if, as Sardar VM Singh is saying, basically, you want that as a guarantee. You are feeling some unease, you're feeling some doubt कि शायद ये MSP का regime जो है वो रहेगा नहीं रहेगा. But if that one demand is not, if that demand is met, that's the end of the protest. That is the crux of the demand.
आपकी आवाज कट कर आ रही है. सवाल का पूरा जवाब. मेरी आपकी आवाज कट कर आ रही है.
मैं अब ठीक आ रही है. सरवान सिंह जी, सरवान सिंह पंधेर जी, आप ठीक आ रही है?
कट कर आ रही है. प्रधानमंत्री जो आपने सुनाया, मैं उस पर कहना चाहूँ तो मैं उस पर बोल सकता हूँ जो आप चाहे. तो सवाल तो नहीं सुना, प्रधानमंत्री ने जो बोला उस पर मैं बोलना चाहूंगा.
जी बोलिए सर.
तो जो प्रधानमंत्री जी जो बोल रहे हैं, पहली बात तो उन्होंने खुद मान लिया. 6 साल हो गई उनकी सरकार को. उन्होंने खुद माना कि मंडी के बीच में जो कुछ चीजें हैं एमएसपी से नीचे खरीदी जाती हैं. तो ये उनके 6 साल के सरकार का फेलियर है ना, जो वो मान रहे हैं अपनी स्पीच में. और दूसरी बात वो कह रहे हैं मंडी के बाहर उपज का दाम अधिक मिलेगा. जो सब्जियां हैं वो मंडी के बाहर ही बिकती हैं. अक्सर पंजाब में अभी भी आलू देख लें तो मंडी से बाहर बिकते हैं, तो उसका अधिक दाम नहीं मिलता. मैं आपको और एग्जाम्पल दूंगा. फिश फार्मिंग कहते हैं, मच्छी पालन, खेती का कितना है. वो तो एमएसपी, उसका एमएसपी भी नहीं है ना, उसके एपीएमसी लागू होता, तो उनके किसान भी तो रो रहे हैं ना, पोल्ट्री फार्म वाले किसान भी रो रहे हैं, शहद मक्खी पालन वाले किसान भी रो रहे हैं, तो प्राइवेट क्षेत्र में बिकने वाली चीजों का भी तो बहुत मंदा हाल है, बुरा हाल है।
ओके, सो ओके, फेयर इनफ। तो आप कह रहे हैं दैट द मिनिमम सपोर्ट प्राइस एनीवे ओनली कवर्स अ लिमिटेड अमाउंट ऑफ क्रॉप्स and not every. But Harish, tell me, is it realistically, can the government make the minimum support price regime legally enforceable? And what would that mean? Does that mean, for example, if a private trader or anybody goes to a farmer and is buying below support price, they'll have to face criminal action? Is that how it's going to work?
I don't think you can force the private trade to buy at the MSP. MSP is basically the price at which the government buys. Okay, and it is enforced, okay. And even there it is not enforceable. But when you make it a legal right, theoretically, a farmer in Rajnandgaon, theoretically, a farmer in Rajnandgaon can say that his linseed is selling below the MSP, and therefore the government should ensure that it should procure. Now, what will a government do? How is the government going to procure linseed or safflower? You know, or many of these things, and what will it do, and where is it going to store these things? See, I would love the MSP to be paid, you know, but it is not legally enforceable. It is very difficult. In fact, the only crop where the MSP
then how do you make it a legal right? So are you saying you can't?
It's
you
difficult.
Can't make it a legal right then, as they're asking for?
Yeah, no. So in the say, for example, the National Food Security Act. There, it's a legal right, okay, and there is a way the government can deliver that legal right through the mandis. Here,
okay, then let me get a.
Yeah, see here how.
Okay, let me get a quick reaction to that from Sardar VM Singh. Okay, no, okay, you're saying Food Security Act is legal right? Sardar VM Singh. Okay, Sardar. Harish, I'd love for you to do that, but I'm completely out of time. I just need a quick reaction from Sardar VM Singh. Sardar VM Singh, how will this become legally enforceable as
pumps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quickly.
When the private petrol pump players came in like Reliance and all, why did you give them protection? You could have said, get your own crude, take your own time, and after that what you do as such is that you can just compete with one another.
Right.
Have the market forces coming in.
Okay.
Why did you give them protection? That the same protection goes for them. Likewise, if we are input cost with your protection, then even the output cost must come with your protection only.
Okay, so you're saying why discriminate? But anyway, it's very, very interestingly poised. We'll have to see how the government negotiates its way out of this. We're completely out of time, I'm afraid, but we will continue to focus on this big story on the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sir, I'd love to come to you, but बार-बार मुझसे कहा जा रहा है कि वक्त खत्म हो चुका है, but we'll definitely have you back and we'll debate this. Thank you so much for watching Reality Check tonight.